Hey everyone, I'm Bethany Crystal. Thanks for having me today. I live in New York City and I'm here to talk about using AI for civic tech. Seems like we've got quite a range of AI familiarity here. So for those of you who are already deep in coding with Cursor and Perplexity and things, you're probably going to be more aware of some of this. And if you're brand new, it's probably going to go a little bit fast. My goal is to maybe introduce a new way of using AI outside of your current workflow, or if you're a real beginner, give you a basic framework where you might start thinking about how to use AI for civic tech and some of these problems. I'll breeze through a brief background about myself. I work in New York City and have done a lot of work over the past 15 years across basically every aspect of the tech ecosystem. Startup life, worked in VC, did a stint through crypto, and have been doing a lot of work with nonprofits in New York City's public sector around New York City public schools, specifically in workforce development. For the past year, I have also been doubling down in my local community. So I'm now the proud president of the Manhattan 75, which is the newly rebranded Block Association for West 75th Street. And I have a recurring meeting of folks that are working with me to galvanize a little bit more community and civic building. And AI has been really helping with that. So I'm going to talk to you about how I use AI specifically with that lens in mind. And right now I'm also building an AI native company. The prototype and MVP of which I vibe coded myself in a weekend. So I consider myself a success story of AI in action. Um, how many people here use custom GPTs? Either like show of hands or like in the chat. Yeah, a couple folks. So ChatGPT is the sort of entry point. We're going to talk a lot about ChatGPT today and custom GPTs, but you can really apply this in any type of AI problem. But custom GPTs for me were the sort of candy to get more into AI. When you come to ChatGPT, typically you just use this basic chat interface and ask a question of the LLM at large. On the left here are basically your mini app store of what you could build just for you. So I've been building these customized chat instances to help me solve very specific problems. I think we have someone with background noise on, if you don't mind muting. Thanks. So we're going to talk a lot today about how you can use these to solve a lot of community problems to hopefully help you move even faster in doing a lot of that work. So I think civic builders in general can really thrive in the era of AI and really need it. I recognize the hard brunt work of community building is often thankless. It has a lot of logistical management. There's a lot of people to talk to, a lot of stakeholders involved, and a lot of information to synthesize, which means AI is perfectly suited to help us solve these problems. One of the reasons I was really excited to get back into community building after getting burnt out in Web 2 is that I know I can move faster on solving a lot of these problems because I can distill information more quickly and have a much higher throughput. So my hope is that the more community builders start to use AI tooling and also train and collaborate with your fellow community leaders to all use AI, collectively we'll be able to just move a lot faster and do the stuff that we really like doing, which is talking to each other, building relationships. So that's sort of the anchoring thread here. And if folks have questions or comments throughout this, please just jump in chat and I'll be kind of following along there. Since we got a couple new folks here in the room, I just want to acknowledge that building AI fluency is not as basic as just learning that there's a new tool like a graphing calculator that can suddenly help you learn math better. It's not actually, I found it's not actually just like using a calculator. It's more like learning a language. And using a language or learning a language requires practice. So if you think back to when you were learning maybe a foreign language in middle school or high school, you didn't just read the book and study. You then wrote out sentences with those words. And then eventually you would turn to your partner and you would start to speak in those words. And for anyone who's experienced like a full-on immersion in a foreign language, you recognize that it's actually really, really powerful to be surrounded by other people speaking that language too. And that's what really helps you unlock some of those things that you just can't capture in a theoretical sense. So if you've been one of those people who's kind of following along on the outsides of what's happening in AI, or you sort of understand that there are a lot of tools, but you're not necessarily using those tools, I encourage you to try to kind of push forward and practice and learn, even if it doesn't work properly the first time. And yeah, you're right. This Lands Elastic EWS news is a great example of one of the problems of AI. And frankly, I built this slide deck a couple of weeks ago, and now if I were to run this again through ChatGPT, my guess is this would be much better because last week ChatGPT released an even better image software that actually can like have a lot of words. But one of the things about understanding how to use AI is also knowing where those constraints are. So for the purpose of this presentation, this is probably fine. For the purpose of like a promotional advertisement where you're going to be sending a slide with something that you need an image, maybe I wouldn't use this. But you don't really understand where those boundaries and constraints are unless you start using tools. So I would sort of say one challenge to yourself is like, what's an AI tool I could try with a community or civic building lens in mind? And that might be making some images for my community association. Now you actually can make flyers and images. I was doing this just yesterday with ChatGPT. Could be helping you with newsletter design, helping you manage agendas. There's like a lot of like little things that you can do and try those new tools because that's really what's going to help you learn. Okay, this is a really helpful lens to think about how to use AI outside of just the sort of entry point to one specific tool. A question to ask is, are you editing a recipe or are you making a cookbook? I like to use this metaphor because I make a lot of things for my family, but my kids are really picky eaters. So my mom sent me a recipe for this vegetable lasagna that I used to make as a kid growing up, but it includes a lot of ricotta cheese, and I kind of wanted to substitute out something maybe a little bit healthier for them and a different type of like substitute. My kids don't eat a lot of meat, so I was trying to put in some vegetables in kind of like a secret way instead. So I sort of like mixed up a lot of things in the recipe. And that's called like substituting what you are used to. But the other thing that is making more interesting is rather than just use AI, for instance, to read a recipe and say, hey, change this, change that, let's make these edits. I could also use AI to design a cookbook that could help me and my family build a series of recipes tailored to our learning preferences over time. And once you start to think about things in that way, you can start to operate in this like scaled out lens. Does that resonate? Maybe nods slightly. So if I were to just use AI for like a general purpose thing, like using ChatGPT out of the box, let's say I wanted to use ChatGPT to write a newsletter for my community organization, I could probably get pretty far by getting a single use newsletter. This is similar to the person who mentioned using AI to help with their cover letters. Super helpful to get that initial flow. But where things start to get really interesting is you could create in ChatGPT, in the paid version, one of these custom GPTs. That's a reusable micro application just for you. And you could say, I want to analyze these past 50 email newsletters that we sent, and maybe also pull in some things I know the community cares about and help me know that there are 4 or 5 key areas that we want to cover every single time and help me get prompting to pull in all of my meeting notes so that I can just dump text into your GPT and then you spit back the newsletter. The benefit of that is then you don't have to re-prompt it every single time and you could just save yourself all that time. The second benefit is if you keep adding more training data to your own mini module, it will help you get smarter over time. So thinking about things in your community or network that you do in a repeated way is a really good place to start looking for where you could use something like a custom GPT or a more scaled out AI application. I'm going to pause there. Does that make sense? Seeing some nods. I'll keep moving on. A couple things. Oh, question. Yeah,
I have a question. I'm a newbie at this, so this might be
great.
very obvious. But one thing that I've learned when learning about GPTs is that the more inputs you put into them, the slower they process and the less of a good job they do. How do you reconcile that with the model you're talking about?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it depends on what you need to be solving. So in my case, if I'm trying to create a newsletter for my block association that might take me, I don't know, an hour to write by scratch, but also 30 minutes of just like pulling together all of my disparate notes into one place and making sure I have everything. If I just dump all of that into a GPT, which is still just using ChatGPT's open interface, it's not using anything like crazy. It'll probably take like less than a minute for me, even if I build in all these like training modules to get a response. So that's actually like pretty quick. Now, if I were trying to build like an instant app and I'm dumping a bunch more context data in, that's like kind of different. So I think it sort of depends on who the end user is of your application and sort of comparing, is the cost to me better or worse than me sort of doing it on my own? Yeah, Sharon.
And this might be better for breakout groups, so let me know, okay?
Yeah.
I have a pretty complex website that I was watching this one place and they were talking about like, it looked like they were using other people's websites and basically scraping them. And I'm like,
Mm.
I really don't want that to happen to my website. But at the same time, I want to take my website and maybe use ChatGPT to make it better. So how complicated would that be to try to lock down your website that it can't be stolen?
Okay, this is a really big existential question of the
Okay.
entire world right now. I
Okay.
do not have the answer to that question, and I actually don't know how to prevent that from happening. Um, I think that one of the main problems that we saw play out in real time this past week when ChatGPT released their new image recognition services was lots of people raising their hands and saying, wait, I didn't give you permission to analyze all of my art, design, style, cartooning, and then repurpose that content. But there's really no way of knowing where these LLMs are training their data off of or what to do. Someone else jumping in? Um, for your personal site, it's kind of hard to know if there's specific things in there that you feel are like really proprietary. I think it's always best to keep those things off the public web in general. And there's like ways to sort of password protect, information like a user login, which would obviously be a lot harder to scrape like a logged in account or password protected service than just like an open thing. But without really knowing how these large mass LLMs are accessing their training data, it's unfortunately impossible for me to answer that. But it's a good question and very valid concern. If you are new to building with AI, one of the things that I think is really helpful is to first think about this in terms of problems that you're solving. And if you're an entrepreneur in the room, or you're someone who works at a tech company and you have an entrepreneurial mindset, this is really similar to that sort of approach where you want to be building something for yourself first to understand how that problem is sort of shaped and how you can sort of manipulate AI, whatever tool you're using, how you can manipulate it to get the outcome that you want. So that's why I suggest picking a problem that's really specific to you. I want to build a recipe builder for my kid and my family. I want to build a way for me to write better meeting agendas at scale for my block association. I want to build a way for anyone in my organization or team to create images is a different and more complicated version. That's like a second step, right? As soon as you start to have other people who are also contributing or building with you, the problem becomes a little more complicated. And then beyond that, if it's different, like I want to build with my block association, is different from I want to create this whole end-to-end system where anyone in my block or community can log in and access information and reveal things. It just gets like layers and layers more complicated. All of this is possible, and all of this is possible in a way more efficient and exciting way with AI. But it's really hard to just come out of the gate and build a really complicated system before you really understand like the cleanly scoped MVP of the problem. So I want to start thinking like that. And there's 5 things that I use to help me think about what type of problem is really good for AI. And the first one is that problem needs to be really, really specific. I find with AI, no problem is too small for AI. And I really encourage you to break it down really, really, really simply. And I'll give you an example of a problem that inspired the building of my now company, MuseCat, is I was going to museums on the weekends with my kids. My kids are 2 and 4. They're really loud and they're kind of hard to manage in large public settings, but I wanted to bring them to museums. But museums are really tricky for a 4-year-old who's really curious and just points at everything and says, tell me about that, tell me about that, tell me about that. She could see that there are words on the different pieces of art around her, but she can't yet read. And it was really hard for me to see what she was seeing, internalize it in my head, and then try to explain that science or art artifact thing back to a 4-year-old. So I naturally just started using AI to help me with that. And I would take a picture of what I was looking at, have AI do the heavy work of translating that content to be a more appropriate age level reasoning. And then I would tell her that. Now I've built a much more end-to-end solution with that, where my app basically lets you take a picture of what you're looking at, put your kid's age in, and it tells a story to the kid from this meerkat character that I built with AI and like an audio story. So it's like gotten more complicated over time, but it really started with like a very basic problem. So that's a really specific need. The second thing for AI shaped problems are really, really customized. Pick who you are building it for. And if you don't know, start by building something for yourself. And then if you are feeling really good, start by building for yourself and one other person. Okay, I built this initial app for myself and my 2 kids so that I could survive a weekend. And I made that really, really effective for them. And now I'm starting to expand beyond. I think one of the things that's really exciting for civic builders around AI is you have really specific, really customized problems that are really hyper local. So these are problems that are not going to be tackled by mega software services out there, but you can help solve them because you are really, really close to those communities. And that's not going to be a problem that's going to be solved by this like broad scale solution. The third thing to think about an AI shaped problem is it has really strict intentionality behind it. You need to know what you want to get at the end of that. And I think people really don't always think about this when they're prompting AI. It's like, okay, I asked it a question and I got a response. Is it a good response or a bad response? I don't know. Well, that really depends on what you were trying to get. So before you even start to use AI, think about in your head, what do I want the results of this to be? When I'm at the museum and I'm taking a picture of something, I want the results of my app to be like a clear description that's age appropriate for my 4-year-old, that has a little bit of playfulness. And I also knew I wanted it to end with an open-ended question to sort of pique her curiosity. So when I was building my model, I told it to build those 4 things. So this is almost like this assembly line approach. You want to make sure you can build something that is going to give you the same or repeated the same output every single time. If you're building a newsletter, you always want it to have the same sections. If you're building an agenda, you want it to look a certain way. So you need to make sure you are describing what that looks like. The fourth thing that AI shaped problems need to be is informed. This is where feeding it that extra context really helps. The reason I think a custom GPT is a great entry point for using AI is you get to do all of these things at once. You can pick a really specific audience, which could be you. You can pick a really specific problem. You can tell it in a prompt, here's what I want the output to look like. Here's what good looks like. Here's the role I want you to play. Here's an example. And then you can upload information, PDFs, spreadsheets, image files, and train it with basic training data that you understand. Now, this doesn't need to be like building an end-to-end app. You can build this based on past agendas or past newsletters or past images and just sort of see what happens. And that's where you sort of understand where that information comes from. And the last thing I want to mention about AI-shaped problems is that they're intentionally expressive. So while we do want to have a sense of what the output is, AI is generative by nature, which means if you put the same input in to the same AI tool, you will get a different output every single time. And that is a feature, not a bug. If I take a picture of the same picture of Vincent van Gogh's Starry Night, and I run it through my app, UseCap, I am not going to get the same readout twice. I'm going to get a lot of similar vibe information, but that's okay for me. I don't need that to be exact and precise. So if you're building a problem set that has a need for a really specific solution, it's going to be harder to get AI to like really get precise on that unless you're also really good at like training data sets and like have that understanding of like precision. That's not a strength of mine. And it's not a strength of the LLMs just out of the gate right now. So when you start to think about that in the context of problems for your community, I think it might help think about ways you can go in. And then I will also just offer this framework to help you go through that problem space for any type of problem. And by the way, this also works for bigger problems too, but let's just get back to this like newsletter idea. The 5 steps are problem, output, prompt, input, and test. So these relate to the things that we were just talking about. First, describe the problem. I want to create a newsletter for my block association based on a lot of raw input data from a lot of different people on my street. The desired output is I want these 5 categories to be in the newsletter week after week. The prompt is the thing I'm telling the AI to help me get to that output. The input might be past examples of newsletters or information to share on my block. And the test is let me run a bunch of raw notes in here 4 or 5 times to see if it's generating examples that make sense for me. You could do this with like a custom GPT, but you could also do this with basically any piece of software that you're building too. So this pop-it model will hopefully help you in building that out. I'm going to pause here. I covered a lot of ground that I normally cover in like an hour and about 20 minutes. So I'm sure there's some questions, but how's this like landing for folks? Is this helpful?
I really like the framing of, I guess, the previous slide where it's really about picking the right problems
Mm-hmm.
solve. I think that's always been my problem. It's like, you know, people are like, oh, you know, you can use AI to do all sorts of things, right? Like, but how, right? Like what is like, how do I even think about how to solve my problems? Like which problems, right? So
Yeah,
just having kind of this laid out like this really helped me kind of like actually think about like what is the outcome and then how do I kind of like work backwards to figure out how to build towards that. That was really helpful for me.
cool. I'll share a couple of brief examples and then I can linger around if folks want to do a breakout. I've talked about newsletter digest, but a custom GPT I actually built for my block is something I call the hyperlocal news bot. So I've been starting these WhatsApp threads for different buildings in my street and content gets kind of shared on there, but often they get really overwhelming. So I built a GPT, a custom GPT, and you can see here I was assigning it a job where every week I was like, I'm going to take the content from my block's WhatsApp thread and I want to be able to dump it in here and have you help me create like a text-based newsletter. So these are the things that I prompted the AI to do. Like we're building this newsletter. It's going to be text-based. Every time I send it, I want you to ask me if I want a different theme that week. So I want these to be kind of fun. I want you to ask me if there's like must highlight things that happen that maybe you might not pick up. I want you to ask me to like dump in all the content of this, then generate this. And here's the 4 categories I want you to include. So week after week, we'll sort of get these. This is like a fun thing that you could also do and adapt like pretty quickly. And it was pretty fun. The second, which I'm not going to go through right now, but this is like a 10-minute video of me coming from a block association meeting and showing how I took my handwritten notes from that meeting. It just felt weird to bring a laptop to a block meeting, take pictures of the notes, use the OCR, build it into like a quick summary agenda, and then like send that back to folks. I did a similar process so you can watch that video if that's useful. I did a similar process to build a website for my block association in basically an hour, where there was a previous website that existed. This is sort of to your point of like, you can train things on previous websites. And I had a newsletter from like 10 years ago that I just took pictures of because I had a printed out copy. I took pictures of it, ran it through the AI, ran the past newsletter website through the AI, said 5 things I wanted to highlight in the new website. And now I have a new website, which is actually connected end to end with Stripe. So people can now like make payments to my block association and donate here. And this took me again, like an hour kind of to set up. So that was awesome. I have a lot of things I write about AI on my blog, which you can find at hardmodefirst.xyz. And then I'll send you these slides too. These are just like a litany of tools that I use for like writing, editing, presenting. I now code with AI, which has been really fun. I'm starting to get into AI agent building, which is definitely a level 2 or a level 3 thing. But like research, content creation, writing, I hope that's all really helpful for you in your work. And these are 3 newsletters I think are fantastic for the newbie in AI or anyone. I subscribe to all 3. So I'm going to stop sharing now because I think we're about at time. I can take a question here, or we can, yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, does anyone have questions? No, no one. Sharon.
You mentioned building the agents, and what was the other thing before that?
Developing, software
Yeah.
development. Yeah.
So, you were flashing them. I wasn't sure. Can you throw up that slide that would be good for those type of tools?
Yeah, let me pull that back. I could just also say it on that slide. I use Cursor a lot, which has come up. I use Replit a lot, and I started to use V0. So these are my current development tools. They're all no code or low code tools with some variation. And I also recently hired an AI that's a developer called Devin AI, and Devin is an AI agent that's linked to my GitHub repos that helps me push tasks. So that's a much more complicated process of like coding with AI, particularly for someone who doesn't know how to code. I'm happy to talk more about that at a later time too.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I'll ask a question. You've shared a lot of really interesting and incredible positive things. Have you, in your personal experience experimenting with AI, had any negative experiences that you can help us understand and learn from as well?
Yeah, I mean, aside from my existential nightmares, basically every weekend that ChatGPT launches something new. Yeah. Um, I think that I mean, we talked about the copyright infringement major issues. I have a lot of privacy concerns. I am raising 2 kids in a world that's increasingly AI native, and I don't know if they're going to be friends with AIs and if I'm going to be okay with that. I'm building an app for parents to enjoy with their kids. And frankly, I don't know if I'm contributing to the problem of like weird parasocial behaviors or somehow helping resolve some of that. And I also am very concerned about the ability of humans in general to keep up with the rapid pace of development and like maintain sanity and like psychological safety in a world where we might not have jobs in the same way. So I have a lot of fears.
I'm just also thinking about this topic of using AI within the context of civic organizing. And, what we've seen with like fake videos and impersonating people, it seems
Oh
like there's
God,
a
yeah, that's a whole other
possibility
category.
for, um, false accusations and kind of negative kind of interactions amongst community members if someone decides to be a bad actor and kind of apply these tools. I wonder if, what we need to find out in the future is whether these same AI tools will allow us to put up some sort of defenses around that to be able to quickly identify, artificially generated posts and messages from fake community members and things like that.
Yeah, and this is a really, really good question. This is part of why I appreciate the time I spent working in the crypto industry. I know crypto has its own set of issues and challenges, but there's something nice about a blockchain-based ledger of validated data. So one of the things about my blog is that it's like a on-chain publication. So whenever I post something, it's like indexed on chain, which means you could see proof that I like cryptographically signed it and that like came from me. So if someone else were to launch a blog and like say that they're me, like, they wouldn't have that same signature kind of behind it. But that doesn't necessarily displace someone from copying my entire blog and republishing it somewhere else and also saying that they're me, So I think there's like sort of questions here. I mean, it doesn't frankly stop anyone from rebuilding my entire app, MuseCat, in a weekend because it took me a weekend to build. So there's a lot of questions here. Yeah, MuseCoin, let's go. To the moon. I don't want to take up too much of your time in this workshop meeting, so maybe we can do the rest if there's like a breakout questions.
Well, if project teams are starting to meet and head into breakout rooms, we can still remain here in the main room. So I'll do that now. I'm going to open up breakout rooms for any project team members who need to coordinate on their civic tech projects. But I think we can continue here. So Sharon, if you had a question that you wanted to ask and follow up with on Bethany, I would say let's just keep going.
I was just going to, how I handled what you were just talking about is I play chess with AI, and it doesn't take me but 3 moves to lose. And that's enough to keep my awareness of these guys are smart, or whatever you want to call this thing, right? And they
Yeah.
can even mislead, right? So I hate to say it, they're not your friend. So, it's a tool, but realize it's got a lot of strength and a lot of power. And we're, like I said, I don't see us in the future being able to outsmart it. So just be aware. That's how that's how I look at it. It's just, I always think of playing chess with them. And
Yeah,
it's incredible.
it is a real double-edged sword. Like I actually, this is like really weird. I like sort of owe my life to AI because I recently had this weird medical health scare, and it was ChatGPT that told me I needed to go to the emergency room right away, and it was like a really good thing that I did. And you know, there's like a lot to be gained from it, but also there's a lot of scariness about the fact that I think ChatGPT sometimes knows more about me than my own like family in some ways. And does that mean I'd really trust Sam Altman? Because I really don't trust Sam Altman. So why am I doing that? Well, it's offering me a lot of value, but hopefully I'm not going to pay the price of that in 6 to 12 months. Who knows?
How do you go to a breakout room? Oh, here, I see it, I guess.
Did you
John,
want to
you have a question? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just curious, given that the tools are changing so quickly and so often, and even a couple of years ago when I started playing around with some of the stuff, so much has gotten better and easier to do. Kind of curious if you've seen like the skills you need change or the approaches you would take to using certain things change over time, and does that mean 6 months to a year from now we're going to be doing these a lot differently potentially?
Yeah. I mean, the short answer is yes. I started this company 2 months ago in January, and at the time, the image was so bad on ChatGPT that I couldn't create duplicate copies of my own Meerkat to like use in marketing materials. So I was like, great, this is something I need to use humans to do. And I partnered with a school and got a bunch of designers that were like helping me conceptualize it. Well, last week, ChatGPT launched this whole thing, and now I'm able to do that. So I had to go back to the school and be like, look, I still want to work with your students and I still think there's value here, but we need to sort of change the way we're working together because I actually can't just pretend like nothing happened, but I'm able to now generate my own marketing assets on my own. So I think there's two things. One is you kind of called it out, John, like the tools change a lot. So you have to be able to change a lot. And that may be the only thing that we need to sort of inure ourselves to is this like adaptability mindset. And then the second is like recognizing that when things change, you sort of need to be able to like turn on a dime and sort of change your behavior as a result of that, which is the harder part.
Do you think for people who have not like really jumped in yet, do you think there's, because things are changing so quickly, that it doesn't really matter? Like your skill that you missed out learning 6 months ago,
Mm.
that's fine because they're all new now, or a lot of them are new now anyway. So there's like no time like the present to at least start
I
trying
think
around.
I think it's really important to practice the habit of learning something new with technology. So whether that means using, the tool today or using the tool 6 months ago, like it doesn't really matter what tool. It matters how you teach yourself how to learn a new tool. So, and I think so that's like one thing is like the habit of like learning new technology and tools is actually something we all need to like get better at. And that's actually a really hard thing because I didn't really know until I was an adult what it means to learn and teach myself something not in like a structured class environment, which I think is part of the challenge here. So yeah, I think that's important. Anyone have like immediate use cases of your AI potential in your own civic environment that you're sort of kicking around? Oh, Sharon has a thought.
I guess I was trying to find anybody in the breakout room. I couldn't find anybody, so I came back here. I guess I got like 3 or 4 things. So right now I have a nonprofit that I wrote all the documentation to be a nonprofit. So since I haven't really thought about what the website wants to look at, I thought I'd just throw all that documentation that I did to write for, the 501c3 and just say, hey, build me a website based on all of this, because I kind of have it in there. And I thought that might be a really fast way to get a website put up, and then I can decide from there, if I like what it's looking like. I wrote a book on purposeful leadership too, so I got a lot of writing. It's a lot
Cool.
of content, and then just put it into the format. The other one I'm trying to do is my for-profit. I got like 4 videos I want to do. That one I'm having a little bit more problem with it because maybe I'm too picky what I want it to look like, right? So I finally found one that will just use my exact script, right? Not like in any of I'm not really liking what I'm getting, so I'm kind of going back to doing it the old-fashioned way.
Yeah.
And then so it's a little frustrating because I feel like there's so much content out there on YouTube and stuff like that. So I just feel like I want to learn what they're doing. And then it's like, what's everybody else doing? If I'm doing it like you know what I mean? So it's kind of not knowing what you don't know is a little anxiety
Yeah,
ridden for
I
me.
I completely relate to that feeling. And I feel that myself as like a founder in this AI space where
Mhm.
like honestly every week I'm like, is this gonna be the week that like Facebook Meta just like displaces my like nascent app idea overnight? Like I don't know. And it's really hard to have a like a firm answer to that, but like being able to know where you don't know and then finding other people who are building or learning alongside you. I think like
Right,
environments like this is like the best thing. So
right,
the way that I'm approaching this is I'm trying to understand how new people to AI are thinking about AI because that tells me where the sort of like entry point is generally, and I'm building an app for general people. So it helps me to know like how familiar people are. But I also want to make sure I'm aware of like what's happening in San Francisco because that's like where AI is happening. So I'm like also going to go
right,
present at like a San Francisco tech meetup with a bunch of devs in like 3 weeks. And in that room, I'm going to be completely underwater and like over my head and come back being like, oh my God, I'm like so far
yeah,
behind. And the reality
right,
is like I'm somewhere in the middle, right? Like all of us are, but like
right.
that's like how I approach it. But I think finding people who are also in that shared learning and doing that regularly is also a really good habit to build.
And anybody else want to, I don't know who's all in the room, but I'll just keep talking and somebody can interrupt me if there's other people waiting. Um, another one I'm trying to do is, and you're saying like personal, what do I need, right? And that's kind of where I went with it. So I call it like a CRM system, but it's not like your call center. Like I'm an executive, so I'm on the phone. And so I record a lot of things just because I'm talking to all different kind of people. And so I'm taking those recordings, putting it up on Otter, which I think I could
Hmm.
tie that to my phone better. And then I'm downloading it. Well, I'm saying I am. I've got assistants doing this, right? And then I
Hmm.
also T-Mobile and take that data and download it. So there's a lot of tasks. Now what I'm trying to do is, since I know how each task is done, trying to figure out an AI tool that could just do it for us. And the big thing I think is passwords, right? Getting into my T-Mobile account, that AI would get into it, just like, how WhatsApp, oh, not WhatsApp, I'm sorry, saying the wrong, Wave apps or like QuickBooks, they'll download your banking material information automatically after you connect them. Do you know what
Hmm.
I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So I'm trying to do that with all of the things I got passwords to.
Hmm.
And I don't know how dangerous that letting AI have all my passwords, but I guess fuck it,
Yeah. What
And
AI
so
are you bequeathing your passwords to, if you don't mind me asking?
I haven't yet. You know,
Okay.
all I've done is it manually so far, but my assistants are getting it, you know what I mean? Because I can't do it all. You're right. So
Yeah, I mean, I think it also comes down to like, what's your level of risk tolerance if it all goes wrong? And you might ask yourself, like, if I were to lose all this, like, what would be the consequence? And am I okay living with that consequence? And
probably
that's sort of like a
not, but
personal. Okay.
I mean, like I know they're saying with T-Mobile, like their mobile phone really ties to a lot of stuff. Like your
Mhm.
security is all like protected by your mobile. It seems like it's incredible. That's why they make it so hard to get in. Um,
Yeah, and I mean,
so yeah,
when you think about like T-Mobile is a case where if someone has access to your phone, they also have access to your two-factor authentication, which means they can
right,
impersonate you. So
right,
like that's an example where like if I were to practice, I haven't practiced AI agents using my passwords to like log into to accounts like me, with the exception of like me using it to like build on GitHub, but that's like a programmed service, and I'm mostly like authing in with developer API keys, not my own passwords.
mhm,
Like I wouldn't necessarily start with a practice round of a sensitive data set like a phone until you really understand. Like maybe you just like make like a demo account on an app you don't care about and see what
right,
that sort of feels like, and like practice like trying to hack your own app basically, and see can I make it do something that would make me feel uncomfortable, and if you can, maybe don't trust that for other more sensitive
right.
things.
Right, right. So, and then I think the one thing that could go, like all my phone calls, they're pretty, not all, but a lot of them are very productive, right? So, what's been really helpful is to add a to-do list. So I have this one after the recordings and all of that. Then I
That's
go
cool.
AI with the transcript, right? And saying, hey, give me a business factual summary, right? And then what we also do is we do a to-do list, and that's working out real good. Now, what I need to go next is um, building, like, let's say, a business plan or a pitch deck or whatever from that notes. I haven't tried that yet. That's what I started looking around trying to do videos, like commercials based on conversations and stuff like that. Um,
Hmm.
but it is annoying because I'm not happy with what I'm getting at all on that jump. So it's a learning curve of
Yeah,
how to
and then
talk
the
to it.
question is it the tooling, and is the tooling not, am I using the wrong tool? Is it the
Right,
technology, and is the technology not ready? Is it my
right,
problem? Is my problem too complicated? Like maybe I can't just start with a pitch deck. I need to start by like putting it in an outline and then like putting that outline into design. Like so you might,
yeah,
there's like a lot of ways to look at how to break that. Or is this not even worth my time because I can do it faster on my own, and I don't do this often enough to like design a whole custom solution there. So
you're
we all
right.
need to start thinking about the classic question in like a startup is build versus buy, and I would almost add like build versus buy versus like not worth my time, and
Yeah,
like that's like the other sort of thing is like just because you can AIify something for yourself, does that always mean that's the best use of your time? I don't know.
yeah. And I agree with you. And I think it's the whole thing of just watching the content on YouTube, like how are they getting so much out? It's just like I think that's what keeps me going. I look at it, it's like a phone and everything else. In a few years, it's just going to be expected that we know how to use this tool.
That's right. You're
So
right.
that's what's keeping me going. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
I need to stay up to date on what it does and what it doesn't do. And
Well, it sounds like you have unlocked a very powerful learning motivator for yourself, which is good.
yeah,
But I see, John,
mm,
you also have your hand raised. Did you want to jump in?
Sure. And I'm not sure how long you want to stay because it is 10:20 in East Coast, but I'm curious because you're saying I think you're someone who has been in tech but have not been an engineer, but you've been learning recently kind of how to use
Oh
things
yeah,
like
I'm vibe
cursor and kind of.
coding.
I'm wondering how you've approached that and like getting your hand around I don't know, the concept of coding and the kind of some of the basic approaches to it within that kind of cursor-based or Devon-based world of writing code.
Yeah. I have worked around engineers for my whole career, so I had a pretty good familiarity with like the process, like the vocabulary to get
Mhm.
me started. Um, what I did not have a good sense of, and I still don't, is like database architecture decisions. And like I just was like, woo, cursor, take me away. And every like new feature would just like create new files in places that didn't make sense. It didn't like link up. And um, when I recognized like, oh, this app I built might actually be a company, I was like, okay, pause. I'm gonna keep my Devin playtime mode as like Bethany fun time prototyping, and I can like deploy 5 new ideas with Devin in like a weekend, which is crazy. But I did pay a contractor to help me build a mobile app. Like basically, like I built a house without a basement. I paid someone to dig the basement out, lay the concrete. But then the last thing I did was I had him sit me through and like go through every single file of the newly actually well designed and well architected system so that I could not only learn it myself, but teach my AIs about it and then vibe code the next iteration. So my guess is I've got a mobile app. It's like in test flight. We're going to get this kind of out the door. I can keep pushing changes here until I hit the next wall, and I'll probably need to bring in another developer. I don't know, like, what that cycle is going to look like, but that's how I've been approaching it.
And do you just make anything differently for kind of the fun time prototype projects versus the like
Do I do anything
newscast?
different? What do you mean?
Like I don't know, just like different ways of handling kind of if you see Devin going off a crazy direction, you're like, just I'm gonna stop, trash this, restart with a new prompt
Yeah,
kind of thing.
I've been building a lot of disposable software where I'll like see a problem and like spin up a Replit page in like an hour just to like test a thing or like try a thing. And each of those is like teaching me a new thing, but in like a really low stakes way. Or I'll like duplicate the MVP functionality of my app. Like this is like so lame, but I don't like know enough about coding, so I'll just like create like a new page on my existing live website that has like a secret functionality that only I know exists just to like see what it looks like and then like run it by some people and like update and edit that where it like doesn't matter to me if that part breaks because I like don't really have real users and it's just me testing it. And then if it works, I can say, okay, great, now I need to like make this better and I can work with like AI or a real human to help me like really incorporate that. I will say I'm also like learning a lot more about actual coding and architecture as a result of this. So this might end up with me like knowing Python in the end. We'll see. Nick? I can't hear you, Nick, if you're speaking.
Hi, can you hear
Hi.
this?
Yes.
All right, sorry about that. Thanks for the presentation and sticking around to answer questions. Um, I I wanted to know, you mentioned Replit a couple times. With
Mm-hmm.
Replit, do you um, do some of the AI work inside of Replit? Does it have that capability? Or are you like copy and
Mm.
pasting from other places?
Yeah. Replit is really fun because you can get to like a really quick like prototype of something. And I will show you like an example of an app that I built. It's on like a real world community thing that I did a couple years ago in New York. I laid Valentines around the city for Valentine's Day that were like about like I love New York stories. And they were just like cutesy little poems all over. And I wanted to like give back to the city, but I didn't have time to do that this year. So in like a day, I was like, oh, let me like recreate a version of that project. And this is like a Replit app that's calling APIs to create New York-based Valentines with like some like custom criteria. So it's like an AI built AI generative app that is using AI. And I did pull like, I use like my API access keys for like the different AIs that I was using. So that was like an example of me like practicing calling AI APIs with it with an AI native code base. But I haven't used Replit for things that require like user authentication, email login, or like true database management, in part because I don't really understand that system enough. I guess in part I don't understand that system enough, and also I'm not an engineer or specialist in those things, so like I don't know even
Yeah,
how to identify if that system is strong enough for that.
I see. Um, so with Replit, when you say you were using like AI tools, like does like Replit have some integrations or make it easy to like put in a key?
It does. Yeah, it does. Like a
Oh,
place
okay.
like Cursor or Devin have like the Devin has like a secret keys piece that you can use for like APIs. Cursor, you would just create like a .m file, like env file, like you would in a normal developer environment. But a lot of these, like there was a story a couple weeks ago about this guy who shared his API keys accidentally when he like talked about what he like vibe coded, and that's like a
Oh,
serious
really?
risk. Yeah, and it was like a real problem, and then a lot of people were like really took advantage of him, and he had to take the app down, and he got a lot of shit on the internet from like kind of a lot of like mean people who were just sort of heckling him, and now he's like trying to rebuild the whole thing and like learn how to code better. So there's definitely like risk there. Like it's definitely a risky situation if you don't know how to
Yeah.
do it. So yeah. And I definitely don't really know how to do it. So that's why I'm trying to like learn incrementally. And when I hit a wall, like, oh, this seems like a thing that really matters. Like that's when I want to bring in like a real human or an expert or like stop until I know a little bit more.
A good cautionary tale. And
Yeah, it
thanks
was a
for
good cautionary
describing.
table.
Thanks for
So,
describing the app that you worked on.
Yeah,
Sharon,
it
why don't
looks
we take
shitty on mobile, so
your
don't look at it on your phone. Sorry.
question, the last question of the night, Sharon? You'd like to? Sharon, you had your hand up. Did you have a
I
last
was
question?
talking in it, yeah. I think you guys are kind of on it already with what Bethany is saying, but I'm curious about user experience of using the tools to check your website as user experience, if it's not ready for that. Does that make sense?
What do you mean by that? Like your personal
Well, you know
website
how
or?
people, you pay people to do user experience on
Oh,
your
I
website.
see.
You know, if people are using it like, for example, my website's almost like a PayPal, right? Somewhere between an eBay and a PayPal. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of interaction. And I don't know if I could get two AI guys or 3 or 4 and playing on this site and seeing what they would find in errors and things like that.
Yeah, I think user testing, both designing the tests and doing the testing are AI solvable problems. I would really caution you in using AI for all of your user research because that takes out the humans in the equation. And in the end, if you're building something you want to try and make money off of it, you definitely need to be like very close to your human users, unless you're building a product just for AIs, which people are starting to do too.
Yeah.
Well, Bethany, thank you so much for
Yeah, I hope this
your
was
time
helpful.
tonight.
We covered a lot of ground very quickly, but hopefully this gives folks some ideas.
I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording at this time.